Men's Motivation Fitness Podcast. Podcast number 3, and we're here today with a science communicator, Matthew Simone. We'll kind of just get you in here. And Matthew Simone, I'm so glad that you're here. Tell us about that definition, science communicator.
Yeah, so there's it's kind of I think it's sort of a growing field now. We have people that are behind the scenes that are actually grinding out the research, right? We have scientists that are in labs, they're making science happen, but not all of them necessarily have the time to then go and connect with the wider public as to the results of that science. So there are people like me in the world. I myself am not a scientist, but I am a science communicator. So I have a great interest especially in astronomy. And so I love being able to go and connect with people in the public and talk to them about the things that we've discovered in the universe. And we do that in places like I work at the H.R. MacMillan Space Center and Planetarium here in Vancouver, and also at the Trottier Observatory up at Simon Fraser University. So through those institutions, I'm able to connect with the public and talk to them about the universe. And it's one of those things I really love to do.
That is pretty cool, especially in almost like this day and age of science being almost considered just opinion, and scientists maybe not having the best 6-second blurb. What do you think about how your role is intersecting with like politics and the way people are consuming science these days?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, because it's not just about sharing the conclusions, although those conclusions are very interesting. Like we can say, hey, we've discovered recently that likely there are probably 2 trillion galaxies in the universe, and this brand new map was made by something called the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, and they created the most complex and complete 3D map of the universe that we've ever seen. But the second part of that is the how. Like, how does the science actually work? So we can say, here are the conclusions we've arrived to, but how did you get there? And so my job as a science communicator is also to talk about how science actually works. And I think that's something that we sometimes have forgotten, or the public sometimes doubts. Well, how did you get to this conclusion? Like, how do you actually know this thing? So part of it is to talk about the scientific process, the fact that it's a competitive process. The scientists are working cooperatively, but also competitively with each other to come to that crucible of truth. It's not just like a group of people in a room that all decide together what truth is. It's something that they are actively working to find, and we refine that truth as well. So one of the questions that I sometimes get at the planetarium is, well, let's talk about like the age of the universe. Right now, we know the universe is probably on the order of 13.8 billion years, but that number has changed from time to time, not dramatically, but on the order of percentages, but not magnitudes. So people will ask, well, before you said this, but now you're saying this, so I guess you were wrong. And you're like, yeah, we were. And now we've updated that number. And that's one of the reasons why we can actually trust science, is that the numbers are being changed and updated as we learn more in our journey.
And I think you said something there that maybe scientists take for granted, which is accepting that they're wrong, or how they go about that process of, making money, maybe making millions for themselves and their institution based on a theory, and really standing up for that, and that being their identity. And then at some point being like, you know what, I was wrong and our institution was wrong, and now this is the thought. Because it seems like that is a core element to navigating conflict and navigating truth and reality.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
It also seems like almost taken for granted. Like how are scientists doing that well, and how do they do it?
Right. So it's something called falsifiability, right? So if I can't state truth as a scientist unless the truth I'm stating can be falsified through scientific process by somebody else, right? So if I'm going to say, well, the universe is this old based on my observations, I take those observations and my methodology and I put them out into the public for them, the rest of the scientific community, to literally tear to pieces, right? And if they can't, then we know, well, okay, objectifiably, we've probably found some truth. Unless I'm proven wrong. So every time, like, science is hard work, because every time a scientist is doing anything, they are putting their whole career, they're like on the line, their work on the line, they're constantly being torn apart. But that's how we come to the truth that we know about things. So, when the public maybe doubts something that's gone out in the public, and certainly we've seen a lot of that, you talked about sort of the politics of this recently. So we're looking around like COVID-19, discussion around quarantine protocols or the masks, or even if the virus actually exists, and you can say, well, every time that information has gone out, there are scientists that are behind that work that have put themselves on the line to say, here's what I think will save lives, and have other scientists like chime in either for or against until we come to a consensus. And that's why anything that we know that we consider a scientific consensus, it's because there's like a vast majority of scientists have all looked at this piece of research and said, yeah, I can duplicate that research, I can duplicate the results, so this is something that we can stake our reputations on. And that's intense work. That's way harder than what I even do, to go and share it at the end, right? Like, I'm basically the person who just hands you the meal, but it's someone in the back that's been doing all the cooking.
Well, and at the same time, servers are some of the highest paid people in restaurants, and you need communicators. You need servers to bring that food. There's two different groups, and so how do you personally then navigate being wrong when you're not the actual scientist that did all the work in the first place, but you're also staking some sort of vested interest in truth, or in explaining a truth, and then people are coming back at you days or years later saying, or even if they don't, even in your mind you're thinking days and years later, I was wrong then. So how are you? How do you navigate that? Because that's something that we all struggle with. And sometimes we try to just hang on for dear life to the previous truth because maybe 10% of it's still true.
Yeah, and I think that it's sometimes like when we're talking about things like the scale or nature of the universe, that can come into conflict with some of our other belief systems, right? So this happens sometimes when I'm working at the planetarium. You say, something like, the universe is billions of years old, and then someone says, well, that's not what I've been taught. That's against my faith. It's against what I understand about the universe itself. But this is where some really interesting conversations can happen, right? Because how does faith inform science, or science inform the faith? So some of those conversations you can have. I grew up in a spiritual background myself, and so at some point I had to reconcile how these things fit together or don't, and what I wanted to decide out of that. And you can get to some really cool places with people. I remember one similar conversation I had with someone up at the observatory, and we kind of came to the conclusion, well, if we believe that the universe was created sort of as a divine act, then at least maybe we can come to the agreement that science was like the ink that was used to write that universe, right? But there's still a place for science then within that person's worldview. And that was a cool conversation to be able to have. It was something new was created there, rather than it just being a conflict. And unfortunately, I think having those conversations is hard when you're not in person, when you're just trying to have it online. And so instead, there's just sort of that conflict, and I think you see that sometimes happening on the internet, in general.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it's almost like scientists write journals and go forward, but maybe science communication is not that's not where it should be for the masses, for the general public to kind of consume. It should be in forums that you're involved with, face-to-face discussion. What do you think about that? That actually it's like exponentially better to have those conversations? Because the scientists would say, well, of course it's exponentially better for me to be able to write down my proof and have all that, and so scientists can delve into it. And as a science communicator, you might say, that's right, that's for those people. But actually it's exponentially better for the general public to engage in science this way.
I think right now what we're especially in the time of COVID, I think we're starting to see both. So so for example, the H.R. McMillan Space Center, the planetarium, so also the observatory up at SFU, but also other institutions like SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, are all doing these online hosted forums in absence of being able to get together and gather in one place, because right now that's not safe for us to do. We'll get scientists on and actually have group forums, so you can actually have discussions, you can post questions, and so we're starting to see more of that when people can participate in at home. And maybe I would like to say, I'll ultimately always want to get back to a place where people are able to gather together in one place physically for real. But being able to see the boost in quality of online forums, because we've had to do that, in addition to being able to meet in person, I think is a good thing. So it's always, better to have these conversations in person. And I'm really missing that right
here on Men's Motivation Fitness Podcasts. We usually start off the podcast just talking about wellness and personal experience in wellness, and that can be pretty broad. So for you, what's some personal experience of wellness, a nugget that you'd like to share with us?
How do I continue to do that? And so I was looking for opportunities to connect remotely, try to also offer my own resources and skills to make some of those things happen. So like hosting events, being willing to help to organize some of them, getting people online together, talk about space sciences still, try to keep ourselves motivated that way. And that's been really good. It's just been like trying to make the attempt to remain connected has been really important for me.
Yeah. And so a lot of people are talking about wanting to do that attempt to stay connected. And sometimes it feels like it's such a new experience for them, and maybe they don't have the avenues. What you kind of just talked about just engaging it, just trying it. Is that your nugget? Is just kind of just go for it, or is there something else that works that worked for you to get there? Because you almost make it sound easy.
Well, I think it was a group effort. So it was a lot of like reaching out to people that normally, like, so for example, the Royal Astronomical Society had a giant convention planned. It was like the national convention planned in July in Vancouver, and we had to cancel it. So at first it was like, okay, well, I guess that's it. Like, we're killing this conference. But then, some of us started kind of talking that were on the convention committee, and we said, well, maybe we can transition the whole thing to virtual. And we had like a month to figure this out. But we're like, let's see if we can make it happen. Let's all become Zoom experts. Let's like figure it out, and let's see if we can make the transition. This is certainly another lived experience of online life.
Really, all across, like even on CNN, or Fox News or whatever you're watching, it's happening everywhere. We're all maxing out our bandwidths.
Our bandwidths, yeah. But yeah, so I don't know how much of that you caught, but it was basically like, how are we going to transition this whole conference over to virtual? And so it's been a group effort. And I've also just been appreciating the number of friendships I have in my life where people are like, let's touch base on Zoom. Like, let's just connect. Let's do a call. And I've never done so many online talks in my life, but it's been great. It's what's been keeping me feeling grounded, even though we're all so far apart right now, alone together.
And you talk about those opportunities that are out there, like low-hanging fruit, that we're all involved in some sort of thing, whether it's just seeing friends posts on Facebook and being like, you know what, now's the energy, the time that I could reach out to that person and say, let's do a Zoom call, all the way to bigger things with personal projects or with work that just transitioned to being online. You kind of leaned into that work.
Yeah, and it was great because the other day we did a remote control of the observatory from our houses, and this was something that we knew the observatory was capable of doing, but we had never really had the impetus to set up before. But now, like, this is the perfect time to try out that technology. So we were literally controlling the observatory up at SFU, but like from our houses, taking photos of Comet Neowise. Like, it was amazing. So if the capacity sometimes exists, but we've just never really tested it in this way. And I'm sure that's true of many people finding out in their lives. Like we're finding out how many of us can actually functionally do our jobs at home. And that might be a permanent shift for some people. I'm not sure.
Oh, you are definitely hitting on exactly where this podcast goes next. And so I'll start with which is the idea around, like, we're learning so much and doing so much and adapting so much. But first, let's play this game called Know Your Apocalypse. I'll start up the intro, and the intro does have end game kind of words in it, so that won't be the clip. I'll let you know when to listen. So this is this Know Your Apocalypse game. And in this game, Matthew is going to hear a clip of an apocalypse movie, and he's going to have to tell us what movie that's from. The whole idea here is that we've seen these movies for a long time. We can get through it. We've seen how to get through insane apocalypses in movies. This is nothing with COVID. So let's put our random apocalypse story into our computer. Good, we're loading up, and and you know, great job on that.
I love that one. I figured it would probably be spacey.
Congratulations on that. You know, exactly. And you know, there's, I believe there is a comet that's has already or is currently flying in between the moon and Earth, or that could just be clickbait that's out there.
Oh, I haven't heard about this one. Yeah, I mean, we actually often will get objects pass between us and the moon. People need to remember the moon is actually really far away. It's like 300,000 kilometers away from Earth. So, you know, it's really, really far out there. And so when objects are passing between us and the moon, it's not like they're right there, you know, because it's still quite the distance. So that's okay. Most of the time when stuff's passing between us and the moon, it's okay. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be impacting us.
Well, that's good. That's good. In fact, this little news story on, you know, it's some UK site, express.co.uk, says an asteroid passed through Earth and Moon June 5th. So quite a while ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens a lot. It probably actually happens more often than we think because we actually find struggle in tracking all of the objects that are flying around in space. A lot of them we don't even see until some of them after they've already hit us or they've burned up in our atmosphere. So the comet was very dramatic because comets are really easy to spot. They're mainly big balls of ice and gas, and they are sublimated by the sun. So the gases will vaporize and creates the big tails that we're able to see. That's why we were able to see Neowise with the naked eye. It just went out at nighttime. You were able to see it in the sky, which is pretty awesome.
That's pretty cool. And so during this time of from quarantine to COVID to social distancing or physical distancing, whatever terms we're using, what's one or many things that you've learned? Because there's a ton that's going on for us right now. But for some of us, you know, you'll hear some people say, my life really hasn't changed at all. And, you know, I'm not sure how much they've seen or learned. And for others, their entire lives have changed. So what's some things that you've learned or experienced or seen in this time of change?
Yeah. So I'm one of those people that always kind of like shrugs off structure. So at first I was like, this is going to be great. Like I can kind of create life as I want it to be for the next little while. Like I was grateful that because I was one of the people who was impacted by job loss, I actually was able to get like benefit from the government for a while. So like I had my needs at least taken care of for a little bit. It's something I was very grateful for because I know that obviously like COVID has impacted a lot of us like very differently, like all over the spectrum. Like for some people, it's been very harmful and very damaging, especially people who got sick. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I was at home and I was like, okay, well, you know, I've got some time. I can sort of live life as I want it, like just free for a little while. And I found that actually that wasn't really helpful. I needed to create some structure. So I tried to find what those structures might be. So try to create a regular routine. So the fact that we had, we started doing like trying to do regular Fridays at the observatory was really helpful. I took on a writing gig, so I started doing some writing when I was at home, which I was really thankful for. Was a paid writing gig, so it was like some work I could pick up at home. That was actually writing for an online space magazine called Universe Today. So that was really helpful. That's a new thing. I just kind of started that, and so yeah, it was kind of like
Universe Today, an online space magazine.
Yeah, and I've wanted to write for them for like 10 years, so it was really exciting. One of the things was I got to meet one of the lead editor and founder of the magazine. His name's Fraser Kane, and he was one of the guests that was at the Royal Astronomical Society convention. So actually, having met them online, I finally just wrote them an email and was like, "I'm at home, so I could be writing." Like, and so he said, "Pitch me an article," and I did, and now we're doing some writing. So that was one thing, and I guess that the other part of that is saying like I had the opportunity to do a lot more networking at home than I thought, and so I've been learning how to like I just be more confident with reaching out to potential opportunities while I've been home, because otherwise I wouldn't have the opportunity to do what I'm doing now unless I've been willing to be like, you know what, like this might be a time to still reach out and connect with people, not like. So still looking out for those opportunities and realizing that a lot of people are still really open to that right now, even though we're all kind of just at home together. So that's one personal, one professional. There you go.
I'm just taking a look on Universe Today right now of a pretty cool picture, and the Andromeda Galaxy imaged at SFU's Trache Observatory, processed by you, and that's a pretty like gnarly photo. Can you tell me a little bit about the Andromeda Galaxy and what I'm looking at here?
Sure, yeah. So when I started working at the observatory, it's got a camera that's mounted on the telescope. And so we're able to take these amazing photos because the telescope's huge. It's 70 centimeters across, like this giant telescope up at the Trache Observatory. Anyways, I wanted to take Andromeda for two reasons. One, Andromeda has an important place in my life. So Andromeda is the closest galaxy to our own, the Milky Way. That's where we live. It's basically, you can think of it as like a city of stars. Right, and we live around one of the houses, one of the stars in that city. So ours is the Milky Way. The Andromeda is the next closest to ours, and it's actually the largest object that a human being can see with the naked eye. So if you're in a really clear night, you can look up and see Andromeda. It looks kind of like a fuzzy cloud. But we were able to image it here because it was one of the first objects that my grandfather pointed out to me when I was a kid, that I remember feeling like a sense of awe and wonder about the universe. And that stuck with me my whole life. I think that moment actually shaped like basically who I am today and a lot of my career path. So I wanted to take an image of it for him to give to him as a thank you. And it was also a gift for an interviewee of ours that we had with the documentary I was making called Chasing Atlantis. Her name is Anne LeMay, and she works for Warner Brothers in their video game department doing narrative game design. And at the time, she was working for a Canadian company called BioWare, working on a game series called Mass Effect. And we interviewed her because Mass Effect was one of my favorite game series, and I found it super inspiring. And then the sequel to that game took place in the Andromeda Galaxy. So as a way to say thank you for her work and for her interview that she did with us, because she worked on Mass Effect Andromeda. We took an image of Andromeda for her and sent it her way.
Well, it looks like something out of a magic or out of a fairy tale, and to think about that's just above us or below us or however space is, but it's out there. It's
mind-blowing. And for me, like, that's really important because on a normal day, I'm always looking to space for, a reminder of up, and away from like the issues that are going on our own planet. So that especially is true now, and not as sometimes it's an escape, but I think it's more of like a retreat, like a regroup, a chance to be inspired by the universe around us, and then bring something of that back and use it in our own world. And one of the things I really appreciate is there's kind of like a growing body of dialogue now from especially people who have gone to space and then they come back, and how difficult they find it just being like the citizen of one country anymore, because you're circling the Earth literally 16 times a day, and there's no border lines on the planet from up there. It's all one world. And right now that's like things like climate change or a pandemic, like they don't care about where we map out our border lines. It impacts us all. And that's why we need to come together to, just like in catastrophe movies, right? We come together as a planet. So it's time to do that.
Oh, Matt, you're right on cue with just the idea of hope and of positivity And so we'll kind of play this bit and ask you a little bit more about that.
Camaraderie, love, family, friendship, struggle, testing yourself, learning. All those things are imperative. They're all a giant part of being a person.
And so, there's so much going on in the world today that sometimes it's great to just focus on what's great about being a person, being alive, being here right now. And you started to talk about some of those things, and I want to kind of, give you that opportunity to, science communicator, Matthew Simone, what is great about being alive and being a human today?
Well, we're seeing scientists work really hard right now to keep us all safe. Science is active right now trying to work on a vaccine, trying to create best practices for us if we need to be out in the open, if we need to be working, like keeping us safe. Doctors are out in the world right now keeping people safe. Our medical care system, all of that is science. Like everything right now that's keeping us safe in the world, that's all science making that happen.
You're right, and that is pretty human. You don't necessarily see other animals out there doing science.
Yeah, I mean, animals learn by experimentation. They may not realize it's what they're doing, but when they're out in the world and they're practicing like tools and trying to figure out how like they find food somewhere, or that's science. Some of it is instinct, but when they're learning by experimentation, that's science. To the degree that we do it, no. I mean, we seem to be the one species on this planet that does that, and so that's why we need to trust scientists. We need to listen to them. We need to support them. We need to be electing governments that believe in science, that support scientists, that are willing to fund science. There are a lot of private industry like that do science as well, but even then, they're still working on many times on patents that have been created first by government funding, that are willing to take on that risk at the beginning of an endeavor, even before profits are going to be made to do research, and that's why all that's so important.
So where do we go if you were talking to the Canadian government? Are there some things that you would say keep doing, and other things that you might say we need to start doing? And I'm just going to turn off my oven.
Sure. What are you making?
We got some barbecue chicken.
Oh, sounds great.
Yeah, for right after this. Yeah, so if you never know who's listening, and so what might you say about what's the path forward? Is just period stop, just more investment, or is it something a bit different than that?
Well, I think in some ways, one of the things I'm really interested in what governments are doing in terms of investment on green energy infrastructure. That for me is like key right now. When election period comes up, I'm like, what are you doing for green energy? Because we need to be making that transition. We're already seeing how the oil economy has taken a total dive, and we weren't really prepared for that. We didn't really save up for the transition and how that was going to work. And we can't just keep harvesting oil like we have been. It's no good. We can't. The atmosphere just won't allow for it anymore. We've pumped so much carbon into it already. Some of the last Canadian glaciers have melted away now, and so like we need to start taking this really seriously. So the federal government already has done some funding on this. As one example, right in Burnaby, so close to our own backyards, there is an experimental nuclear fusion reactor that's being built called General Fusion is the company. It's like right behind a Costco at the base of Burnaby Mountain. I used to shop at that Costco. I didn't know there was a fusion reactor behind it. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
But that might be one of the key alternative energies that we use. Fusion would be super cheap, super clean power. To give you an idea, right now in Canada, to run 10,000 homes for a year in Canada uses 55,000 barrels of oil. It's heating, that's electricity, it's everything. You could run the same number of houses, so 10,000 houses for a year off fusion power, off 1 liter of hydrogen. 1 liter. It's nuts. It'd be like running a house on an eyedropper for a year. So, and the only byproduct of it is really just water. So if we could get this working, stuff like that, and fusion has been the joke about fusion is that it's 30 years away. They said it was 30 years away, and now 30 years later, it's still 30 years away. So that's kind of the joke, is that it's always 3 decades away. But most experts have said for maybe $10 billion, the world could get fusion operating. And that's like, Facebook spent like $11 billion last year just on research and development. So, I mean, 10 billion for the world is cheap. So it's one of those things that we could invest in. So the federal government did give General Fusion a pretty big grant. So they are starting to do this now, but that would be what I'd be looking for, is a government that's willing to look at solar power, more electrical cars, fusion, stuff like that, wind.
That is so cool. And even people, just the way we're treating the environment in general, people have been saying that this COVID issue in some ways is helping us realize, wow, yeah, we need to slow down. We need to do things differently. This is getting us a bit sick. And we already know how, as a huge population, as a world, we can get really sick with climate change and things like that. So in some ways, maybe this time is a bit of a, just a wake up call.
I hope so, because if anything, it's also just shown how many of us in society live on such thin margins. And that if the slightest thing happens, it's homelessness or it's starvation. Like there's no safety net for some people. And so, and those are the people that we now have classified, and should have for a long time already, as essential workers, And so it's like, well, these people are grinding out the day to day to make sure that society works. We should be taking care of them. And so, if they're, if so many of us are living in that kind of fragile place, then yeah, hopefully society, we can look at that and say society needs to come back stronger. And I think that's already happening. Like when we look at some of the movements that are going on right now in the world, it's to look at marginalized people, to understand how we've been pushing huge segments of our society off into the margins and where their life was in those margins. And now a light has been shone on that. And so we need to listen to those people, right? We need to listen to people who are saying, this was my lived experience. And it always has been. And it's only coming to light now. Let's pay attention to that.
Oh, I do love where this conversation's gone. And it's been pretty great. It's we're going to start wrapping up. And as we kind of wrap up, do you have kind of any kind of a summary of what you've kind of talked about and told us today, or a call to action, or really just some final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Listen to experts. They care about you, and when people ask her, like, if in a workplace, wear a mask, please do that. It's not a huge sacrifice on our part in order to keep people safe. Listen to scientists when they say what work they're doing, because they're working hard, go out and thank people for it. If you know a scientist, if you know a researcher, someone in your life who's doing this stuff right now, make sure you say thanks to them, because they are working round the clock. The whole planet's working round the clock right now to get a vaccine, to keep us safe, so we can, go back to life, but maybe better life. Maybe this is a chance also for us to make things better. So if I have a second message, then the first one was science, the second one is empathy, because I think those two things right now are what's going to see us through.
Thank you so much, science communicator Matthew Simone. Folks, if you want to check out even just some of his writing, Universe Today, you can search in there, Matt Simone. He's got some great photos that he's taken from the SFU Tracce Observatory, and he's got some good writing pieces. And you can also connect to him there. Any other places that people could connect or find you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in film work, we've been working on a documentary now for a while called Chasing Atlantis. It started as a road trip to go see the last space shuttle launch, and now it's kind of more about how do we revisit childhood dreams, but in our adult lives, right? How do we take those things that we were passionate about as kids and still keep them throughout adulthood?
Amazing. ChasingAtlantis.com.
Yeah, and if you're into charity work, we're supporting a school in West Africa on a project called Esther's Echo. And it was a school that was started by a local woman in Sierra Leone named Esther Kanu, and we support her. And they need help right now during COVID as well, because they've been shut down for a while and unable to operate and generate income. So we're going to be doing some fundraisers for them in the next little while. So if you're into that too, check out Esther's Echo. Esther'sEcho.org or ChasingAtlantis.com. Matthew Simone, science communicator. Thank you so much for coming on today's podcast.
And yeah, exactly. Just talking about some really good things today. So I guess with that, we'll wish you adieu. But again, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. See you later.